Thank you for joining me on the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, AZ. I find the research and resources and then provide the fire service with the so what, now what, to ensure the health and well-being of every member of our profession. Together, let's thrive. Hey, it's AZ. Today is episode 162, and I will introduce my guest, Jadie Miller, in just one moment. But I wanted to remind you the Women's Tactical Human Performance Summit is coming. It's May 9th. It's in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Live and virtual options are available. I'm telling you right now, though, you want to be there live. You want to be there live. This is for law enforcement, fire, other public safety entities, as well as the military. And we have unbelievable speakers lined up for you. I'll put the link to register in the show notes. Also, I am, for the first time in 2 years, starting another cohort of my class, Building a Career in Fire. So if you are an athletic trainer, a physical therapist, heck, even a physician, a dietitian, a mental health professional, a strength coach, and you want to work with fire and you're running into barriers, my class is the rocket fuel to get you there faster. So that link will also be in the show notes. I met Jadie Miller just a couple weeks ago at the Women's Fire Alliance conference in California. She's incredible. She's a career firefighter and the founder of a business called PYROC. And her business is dedicated to more or less changing the way we care for firefighters and optimizing performance in firefighters. And so you're going to get to hear about firefighter syndrome, operator syndrome, and so much more. I know you're going to enjoy this one. So please, as always, give me a rating and review and share the podcast. Hey everyone, it's AZ with the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast, and I'm with my new friend, Jadie Miller. Jadie, say hi to the people.
Hello, people. So great to be here.
I know, we just met. I feel like it's almost 2 weeks ago now.
It is time flying already. It's like 2 weeks, yeah.
I know, at the Women's Fire Alliance in California, which shout out to the women at Fire Alliance. It was such a great event.
It's a lot of work, and the women take it very seriously to do the best that they can, and it was very evident. Like watching the women kind of orchestrate and work together to make sure that everybody was fully engaged, that everybody was receiving the education that they needed. It was a privilege to watch for sure.
It was great. And then one funny story, I tried to take home I left the brass knuckle thingy there, obviously, but I tried to. Oh, did you get pinched at security?
I got it home. I got it home.
You did?
I checked my bag.
Oh, I never check a bag. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I got stopped at security over the bath salts.
Oh,
so they had to do a big bomb check on the bath salts. So, but shout out to the Women's Fire Alliance. What a swag bag. Anyway, how do you feel about introducing yourself? I'll ask you 3 questions and you get to answer them. How do you feel about that?
Bring them on. Let's go.
All right. Who is Jadie Miller?
She is overly serious. That's why my husband acts like an 8-year-old. He completely balances me, makes me laugh all the time. But I am someone who kind of thirsts for life, questions pretty much everything that's thrown my way, but always want to see both sides of the equation. So I seek balance. I seek truth from all perspectives. That's really important to me. You know, they always say that there's more than one side of the story. There's, theirs, yours, theirs, and the one in between. And so I really kind of sort of seek out that. I'm a mom. I'm a wife. I'm a firefighter for just about 20 years. Business owner of a company called PYROC. And that's the gist, but there's so much more. But specializing in sort of organizing and frameworks and trying to make things become like super logical and functional for people, and trying to apply that skill to probably what we're going to talk about today, and looking for opportunities to always kind of detach from humanity in the sense of I really love nature. I love hearing the birds. I think if I had to lose sight or hearing, if I could never hear the birds again, that would really mess with my grounding. you know? But yeah, that's me.
I knew when you were talking, it's like recognizes like. I'm like, oh,
Mm.
that we are on the same wavelength. I love that. What sets your soul on fire?
What sets my soul on fire? Love for humanity, my faith, and seeing people find their value, seeing other people or being a part of other people finding their value. There's nothing better than whether it's your child, your coworker, a complete stranger, when they sort of stop and they look at you with this, wow, I can't believe it. Like, are you for real? Like, that was amazing. And then they go, I can do that too. And you're just like, yeah, you can. And that just brings me so much joy.
It's the aha moment. I love that too. So good. And then how are you changing the world?
Okay. That's a good one. By changing myself. I can only control what I bring to this world. And then from there, the more that I become more accountable to who I am and what I contribute in this world, that's where the true change comes from. And then as a mom, trying to raise a human that this world needs, not already has, I would say would be the sort of the secondary piece in how I'm trying to change the world.
Be right back. Gotta write that down.
Oh.
No. Well, and the thing is, I absolutely want to talk. I want to get to your business and I want to get to how important that information is to the fire service. But I also think that your story is going to resonate with so many people that haven't heard it yet. And so the thing that really hit me when you were speaking was the fact that your parents just kind of like, peace out. They checked out.
Yeah.
And you were on your own. Do you mind going back that far to kind of talk about that?
No, I'm getting more comfortable talking about it. I think, if you would have asked me that question 3 years ago, I was really trying to hide that piece of my equation because I wasn't sure. And maybe not 3 years ago, but definitely 7 years ago, no one knew my story. But as, you hear over and over again from all the gurus out there, vulnerability is strength. And I truly, truly believe that. So yeah, I'm okay with talking about it. The gist of it is I grew up on a farm. We were very, socioeconomically kind of in the lower class of things. We very poor family, 25 acres, sort of a farm. And my parents they did really great for the first sort of 8 years of my life. Well, I would say 7 years. And then that last year, everything started to fall apart. So there was abuse in my home. My dad was arrested for abusing my mom, and that really spiraled everything out of control. And looking back at the situation, when I hit 8 years old, both of my parents sort of, I call it disengaged as parents. They abandoned me as a child. They abandoned my brother as a child. So my brother was 13 at the time. I was 8. And I always say disengaged because as an adult, I can look back and see the struggles that they were having from their childhood. And I can see that, as much as they didn't give me, they left me so much more that I've chosen to take from it. But at 8 years old, my dad was a long distance truck driver. He was never home. He ended up getting custody of my brother and I, which was like unheard of, that the dad got custody. Don't know why. My mom had a restraining order. Don't know why, because my dad was the one who abused my mom. And it kind of got really confusing at the time. But the result of that was my brother and I had no parents. And so my brother was 13, so I would follow him around like crazy. And that would lead us to the streets. So we spent a few years literally living on the street because my dad was never home to pay the bills. So there was no heat, no hydro, no food, We lived on, again, on a farm, so there was no running water. So the street was where you could access all that stuff. So we would go out and we would get into trouble. I would follow him into drug houses, where, I would see women sell their bodies. I would see needles. I would see drugs. I would see drug deals. I would see, collections of, you haven't paid yet. So, and if you don't pay, this is what happens. Got into stealing, got it for food. Did that from 8, 9, and I get the time frames a little messed up, so time is not my friend when it comes to remembering. By the time I was about 10, I was hiding from my educational system, like from my teachers, that I had no food. I was still working hard to go to school. Obviously was made fun of by the kids because I wasn't showering or I wouldn't have a lunch. So I kind of received a pretty heavy dose of bullying. And I remember going up to one of my only friends at the time and said, do you think I could live with you? And she said, I don't know, let me ask my mom. So we asked the mom, and the mom said, yeah. So they turned it into an unofficial sort of foster home. That family was super hard on me, but is exactly what I needed. It was like super tough, beautiful love, but I hated every minute of it. But I can look back and be so thankful. But by the time I was 13, I was strong-willed and moved out on my own. Lied about my age so I could get a job, and got a full-time job, went to school, and kind of carried working for McDonald's for a few years until I could sort of get myself off the streets, and into, because my parents were still not engaged. They'd come visit, here and there. And then from there, once I got into McDonald's, it was really about trying to use something. A lot of people would go to the military. I would use a fast food chain to get myself into a position. So like every 3 to 6 months, I was getting promoted. And then, did the university courses for business and was operating my own restaurant. Got to the point where I kind of joke around and I say, well, I've been killing people for 10 years. Like, what happens if I start saving them? So at 26, I decided to leave McDonald's and become a firefighter. So that's the gist. The Coles Notes.
First of all, I've heard several people tell a story recently about how at a very young age, they followed a sibling out to the streets, and then just the wonderful after stories just blow me away. It's just incredible. I have to ask you a question before we go any further.
Yeah, sure.
Do you have a husky?
Can you hear it?
Well, it's so funny because it's usually my last question of the podcast, like talk about your dogs. And I'm like, your dog is super unhappy right now, but is it a husky?
I have 2. I have a Great Pyrenees because we live on a farm.
Okay.
And I have a Boxer Bulldog cross. And there's little kids that live like about half a mile down the street, but she can hear them. So she talks to them when they're outside playing. So I apologize if you can hear them in the podcast.
It's so funny. Well, now we've messed up the whole order of the podcast.
I have them locked outside, so they won't come in, but you might hear them in the background. I'm sorry.
Oh no, that's fine. Yeah. So you were killing people with the fast food for a decade. Yeah. No. I truly believe that. I did that as well in college. I worked at the Hardee's restaurant chain in college. And you decided to help people. What does that process look like in Canada? Is it similar to the US?
I don't think so. Like, it took me 6 years to get hired. It is, I understand it to be a little bit different. So we would go to a community college or a fire specific academy, which is not a part of a particular department. So ours are separate. So once you go through the process of deciding that you want to become a firefighter, you go to school for it, and you would get your NFPA 1001, 1002. So that part is, we would get our 1002 with ours. And then you can start the process of applying. And what that looks like in Ontario and many different provinces is that there are organizations that govern the recruitment, the pre-recruitment process. So in Ontario, it's OFAI, which is the actual acronym eludes me, but that's one of the processes. And basically what that is it's they would conduct your physical test, your written test, your clinical, and your medical. And they would clear you, and they would say to the fire department that you're applying to, yes, this candidate is qualified to even apply to your department. And then so once you, and that's probably about $1,000 just to do that. And so every time you would apply to a department, the department can pick the standards that they would use for you to even just apply to that department. So if you had just finished your OFAI, or all your clinical and your physical and your written exam, and in let's just say February of this month, and it would expire sort of 6 months from there, they would say, well, you know what, we don't want you to, like, let's say it expires in February. So just to be easy math. So your process expires in February. Well, we want you to be good for March. So you actually have to redo the whole process again. So you have to pay another $1,000 just to meet that. So my husband and I, we kind of sat down one time and we kind of looked, because he's a firefighter as well. And we looked at sort of the cost associated to just applying to a fire department. And it was double-digit thousands over the course of. And that's just, you apply, you spend the money, and there's no guarantee that you'll obviously get. It's out of your own pocket. And then the department itself, when they list the requirements to even apply, can change that. It's different from department to department. So you're sort of stuck in this game of kind of chess as to when you get this qualification, how long it's good for. Do you work to keep it updated because you want to stay ready to apply to the next department when it opens for a posting, or do you let it lapse because every department wants something different too? So it all depends on you as an individual, what your financial situation is to apply. Once you get started into the process, so every department requires an individual physical. So that would be like a skills assessment. And then they can also put you through like another skills assessment, which they design in-house. There's sometimes a psychological assessment. That's a 50-50. Some more departments are doing that. But unfortunately, those departments are using a police screening, which is not applicable to fire. So you're asking, it's apples to oranges. So you're actually even applying the wrong test to the wrong profession. But it is part of the process. And clinical, so that's hearing, your vision. You're not allowed to wear glasses. And then, you get into the interview and so on and so forth from there. So for me, it was 6 years to get hired.
So tell me about your first full-time job.
Oh, my first fire full-time job?
Yeah.
So I was in that department in the Southern Ontario. I knew nobody. I had sort of circled, I had drawn a circle on a map from where I lived, and I was willing to drive 3 hours to commute. I know, don't ask me why I came up with 3 hours, but I did, because that was just the number that made sense at the time. And so guess what? I got exactly 3 hours. So careful what you wish for, folks.
Yeah, be very careful.
Yeah. So my first full-time job was Southern Ontario. And it was a, moderate-sized department, sort of 6 stations, probably about 160 to 200 folks. And it was a hard, traditional, old-school department when I first got on. So rookies were dirt. And at first, it was really hard to adjust to, because it was a culture shock for me. It was, I go from McDonald's. I had no sort of trades background. Trades is pretty rough. Like they have a very strong culture. And half the people that work in the fire service are trades related, right? So at the very beginning, I was like, what the heck is this, right? But we got like pranked every day. So that was super fun for like a year, every day. Like you had water and flour flying at you from left, right, or center. And you got really adjusted to it. And I learned very quickly about the old school traditional culture and grew to love it, grew to appreciate it. The department itself was super, super regimented with their training. It was very, very paramilitary. Like, it was like, what are you wearing? Wear your uniform correctly. At 3:00, you mop the floors. At 1:00, you train. It was at 10:14, so I was working 10-hour days and 14-hour nights every 4 days. So I do a block of 4 days, off for 4, a block of 4 nights, off for 4. Um, a mid-range sort of kind of socially, economically diverse community that I had to serve. I didn't know anybody. I didn't know the service. Nobody knew me. So it was hard to break through a small community like that and get connected to the people that worked there, as well as the community that I served. But man, by the time I left, I was sad to leave. I really loved the experience. I was finding my role. I was finding my voice. I grew to love the difficulty of trying to be accepted. I grew to value that, and I grew to understand it and why the culture was demanding that. And so it became a sort of a part of who I was. And the only reason why I left that full-time job was because I got pregnant, and my husband and his family were back in that original 3-hour time zone that I had just traveled from. So I moved to a southern, sort of northern department. But that first job, like your very first fire, they'd print the report for you and you'd like tape it to your locker. There was a lot of pride, a ton of pride in what it meant to be a firefighter, what it meant to look like a firefighter, what it meant to train like a firefighter. Yeah, it was a great experience.
And when you left, again, it was only to get a job closer to home.
That's correct.
Would you say that once you transitioned to that department closer to home, would that be when things got a little bit more challenging? Or were you having some pretty good challenges the whole time?
It was just different challenges, I think. So the first department was super structured. They didn't hire outside of the community in which they served. It was very, like, I was one of the first groups that they hired outside of the community, which also made it difficult for me to be accepted, because if you didn't know where Tom, on B platoon lived, you didn't know the city. Like, where's Tom live? You know what I mean? So Tom lived on, Rodman Street. Well, then we know where we know that you know our people. And if you couldn't say where Tom lived, you became an outcast really quickly because you didn't know the community. It wasn't your community that you were trying to serve. So it had its own unique challenges. I remember driving the fire truck, and I don't know if y'all have MDTs, but back in the day, I'm old enough to now know, like, there was a time when you went to the map and I go down Vesper Street and it's, 3 streets on the left. I make a left, and then it's 2 streets, then I make a right, then I got to make 5 more, and then so you counted how many streets you had to pass before you made that left and that right. So they were technologically like inept. There was like street drills where they'd pull the streets out and they'd make you write down on the map, you blank map, you tell me the streets, come on, you don't know, you're in trouble, right? You're doing push-ups. So it had its own challenges, but it was super structured. Coming to the new department was hiring people from all over within a driving range. They were now on the 24-hour shift, so a huge shift in my schedule. For anybody that's never worked a 4-on 4-off schedule, it's not as difficult as what the States has. But when you would get to that 4th night of being on nights, like you just felt drunk, like you were. It was just very different. So now I've had a shift schedule to a 24-hour shift, which it has its own challenges. And everybody was from all these other different departments, but also you had multiple, they prided themselves on hiring full-time firefighters from other departments. So what this particular culture would have was a whole bunch of skilled folks from other departments, but not a culture of their own. The culture of their own was a mashup of other departments coming in and applying knowledge in a sporadic way at that time. It's come a long way since then. So it didn't have the same you need to earn it rookie, because half the people that were coming in had been full-time firefighters somewhere else. So the hierarchy of who you were on the floor was different. Does that make sense?
For sure.
And
For sure.
and I come from something where you're scum until you earn it. And now Joe just got hired and he's allowed to sit in the lazy boy. Like, excuse me? Like, that blew my mind. Like, you're not allowed to sit in the lazy boy until you're like 5 years on, bud. Get out. Right. So I struggled with that part. And then now it's my community. So there's a different, I'd go to calls and I would know, Mr. Thompson that, was my rugby coach. And I'm like, Mr. Thompson's fan. That's not his real name, just to be sure. But, showing up to Mr. Thompson's house to take care of his daughter because she's not okay. So now it's a new level of challenge. Yeah, it was just different. It's been different.
I went through a bit of time myself where probation was fine because I think everyone's just busting their what's on probation and trying to survive.
Sure.
And then, on day 366, when we all got off probation, I never felt like I got off probation.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just kept proving myself and proving myself and proving myself. And, and things just went really dark really fast. Now
Sure.
I know that you mentioned things got real dark for you as well. So can we start building that? Like, what are those pieces that were falling into place that were just making this job that both of us loved when we started be so heavy for us?
Well, I think this would be the best time to introduce firefighter syndrome. And so firefighter syndrome, and I got the privilege to be the co-author to, it's a framework, and we talked about that before on some of the podcasts, but also at the conference that we worked together with. And it's not a diagnosis. It's a framework of 19 different things that this job affects. And so inside that framework is the concept that over time, those 19 different things, they get affected in a negative way, and they stop us from being able to sense our environment and who we are inside that environment and how we function inside of that environment. So with that concept in mind, when things got tough for me, sort of two things were happening. I would say at that particular time, I had still brought with me the need to survive from childhood adversity, was still toting along with me at that time. And so I'm going to just hit this nail on the head right now. So I am of the opinion, and for all the women listening, I love you deeply, but there is a strong misconception. I am of the opinion that there is a strong misconception placed on, not always, let me just be clear, there's an exception to every rule, and I want to be very clear about that, that we as women are not wanted in the fire service, or we are not capable in the fire service. I was told that by women firefighters that I would have a difficult time coming into the fire service. And so I expected that. And so I was like, you need to prove it harder. No, slow down. You don't need to prove it harder. You just need to prove it. That pressure that you're feeling of not being accepted, it's coming from me. It's coming from you. You're the one beating yourself up more than any man could. And that is because we as women are not supporting each other to be who we need to be in our space. We are not the same as men. We are equally powerful, but uniquely different. And you don't need to come into this fire service. I've been through every phase. I have tried to act like a dude. I've tried to look like a dude. I have done it all. I did not, I stayed with a dude. And I wasn't attracted to females or even try to be attracted to females. It just never crossed my mind. That's just something I never did. That doesn't matter. That's irrelevant. The point is that as a woman coming into this fire service, you are going to explore different facets because you're trying to fit in. And what I'm asking you to explore is who you are and what you have to offer. If you don't want to be in this fire service, if you don't want to work as hard as the guys do, then maybe this isn't the job for you. And that's okay. That's the hardest thing that's the difference between men and women. A man, in my opinion, throughout the course of the service, they are just like, they don't think about it. They just like, get in there, get dirty, get working. It's like, it's a badge of honor. And a woman's like, oh, okay. Whew, I got to get in the right mainframe. I'm going to go at it because we're intellectual stimulations, right? A man is like, that loves that testosterone. Testosterone is real. Like they need that outlet, right? We got to fight for it a little bit more to jog in there and get going. But that pressure comes from us, not the men. The difference becomes when we say to them, we are equal. We can do what you do. I don't want to do what they do. They do it so beautifully. And I have so much respect for what they do. And you know what? They do need me when I know my role. And I am equally as powerful, but uniquely different. And my power comes usually from my connection with humanity, my connection to them when they need help, what I can offer from, like, I remember one dude and we were trying to hook up the hydrant. It was such a basic task. And he was trying to come from the left. I was trying to come from the right. I just stopped. I was like, how do you see this going? Because my female brain is seeing it way different from what you're seeing it, right? So we kind of talked about it. And instead of like him getting mad at me, we ended up laughing about it because I recognized in the moment, we're just seeing this differently. And that's all it is. Usually the same task is going to result in A. It's just he's going to take route Z to get there, and I'm going to take route F to get there. And we're going to get to the same place. So that's one thing I wanted to hit the nail on the head for first. So like a lot of that pressure, that dark place, it was because I hadn't learned my value, going back to the question you asked. And the second piece of that equation is because I was suffering from firefighter syndrome, I was sleep deprived. I had a very, very heavy dose of toxin exposure, lithium battery ion recycling plant 3 times in 1 month. I had a dump fire where I was exposed to a methane collection cell for 5 hours in an oxygen included environment. I had asbestos houses over the course of my career within a short period of time frame. I was totally cranked for teaching recruits search and rescue. Like my favorite fire subject is fire attack and search and rescue. So anytime I got into the opportunity to teach new recruits how to do that in a live, we call it smokehouse. You're like, what's a smokehouse? You know, that place you practice fire and you burn like straw and stuff. So inside there, I was in there. But I was just constantly like a barrage of exposures. And it was getting to the point where I was drinking every night, enough to be more than what I should every single night. And I learned that I was becoming a coping mechanism through creating the firefighter syndrome framework. One of the things I learned that is if you're suffering from a TBI, alcohol is not your friend. So it's a lot like, gas on a fire or oil and water, whatever your analogy you'd like to use, but it was inhibiting my health, my recovery. And it was adding to this dysfunction of my endocrine system. And my endocrine system is where kind of like that fight or flight or rest or digest system was working. And I was only feeling anger. And if I had an emotion, it was only anger. And I was just snapping like left, right, and center. And I found myself in sort of a vacuum where the dark place had nothing. The dark place had no emotion. And one of the things we talked about and I shared when I spoke previously at the conference was that I'm a super emotional creature. So, and emotions are like tools for me. Over the course of my life, I've learned to acknowledge that what I'm feeling should not define me in the moment, and that even though I'm angry, it's not the right emotion in this moment. I need to check myself and unpack that as fast as I possibly can so I can invoke the correct emotion to handle this maturely. Or I'm feeling goofy, and maybe goofy's not the right time to have that emotion either. And so, like, just two examples. So when I got like this super emotional creature, sliding into a place where there's a vacuum where I feel nothing, it really showed me that, I really don't understand suicide. And there's so many of our folks that have committed suicide. But it showed me that when we have a physiological dysfunction or an injury or a complex injury, like we're suggesting firefighter syndrome is, it can lead to things like suicide ideation, that it's not necessarily a mental health issue, that it's a physical issue. And, for years, science has said, well, if you're suffering from stress, it can affect your body. Well, we also know that if your body is suffering, it can affect your stress. So why aren't we looking at these two things combined as being valuable? And so that's what Dr. Chris Free and I did with firefighter syndrome, is exactly just that, is combine it. And the only reason why we were able to do that was because of his work with operator syndrome, and his team works previously from the military, helping the special operators face some of the challenges that they were going through. So, so we created that, and we did the fire, and that's what my dark moment was all about.
Can you elaborate a little bit on the operator syndrome? Because that was going to be my next question.
Oh, yay. Segue.
Segue.
Yeah, you bet. So operator syndrome, since World War II, I'm probably going to get this wrong, so somebody can Google this and send me an email and tell me what the right number is, but just for fun. Since World War II, PTSD in the military has gone up something like 800%. Like, it's astronomical. And Dr. Chris Free wrote a textbook about PTSD. So he was a specialist. And so he was getting very involved, and I'm missing about a million, points of value here to explain how he was involved. But he was very, very involved. He was working with the Veterans Affairs, and trying to help, combatants come back and deal with some of the things. And as they were going through the list of assessments, they started sort of seeing a themology, like a theme of what was happening with some of these operators. And a lot of it was like low testosterone, which when you don't say low testosterone in combination with special operations, like those two things, that's not what you envision, right? So that alone was like, you have some of the most highly skilled, highly aggressive, highly advanced, human performance moving into a field of execution, and these folks have low testosterone. He's like, what the heck is happening here? So he and a handful of his colleagues started to kind of come together and say, what are some of the things that we're seeing? What is going on? And how is this, adding to the situation versus being the only part of the situation? And I think that's the key, is that someone who was a specialist in PTSD only started to say, this is only a part of the problem, and perhaps not the correct part of the problem. So we're overdiagnosing PTSD because it's increased over 800% or whatever that number is. It's a lot. And maybe maybe this isn't the only thing. So they started a framework and they started to track exactly sort of what they were seeing. And that tracking led to a framework called operator syndrome. And it had several different domains or categories that they were finding. And TBI was a very significant piece of that equation, because with the military specifically, that TBI component is induced by impact. So, and this is one of the main variations between operator syndrome and firefighter syndrome, is that TBI for military is blast wave. So that, you set off if you're a breacher and you breach, you sort of get a blast wave from the explosion, and it comes in and it shears and it creates an injury. Different, but similar. The point is that there's an injury to the brain that's impact based, and there's your primary and secondary impact. So we know that when there's an impact to the head, and then the brain on the inside has a secondary impact. And then you also have these blast waves. And so when the brain is not functioning correctly, I always liken it to like incident command, right? So your brain's your incident command. So if incident command is not working, what do you get? You get a whole bunch of freelancing firefighters and shit goes south, right? So that's what happens in the body. So you have this incident command, and your endocrine system starts to deregulate. Your sleep starts to dysfunction. Your soliciting the right emotion is almost highly impossible. When these folks are needing to be at their best, creating this framework has allowed the military operators in the regions that they're addressing it, and it's really starting to grow with support, to receive the correct treatment. And by receiving the correct treatment, which is a whole system framework to address the specific things like doing sleep studies, doing hormone panels, testing for testosterone and cortisol and even estrogen, even in a man, progesterone, all of those different hormones, seeing what they do and how they interact and where the dysregulation is. Cortisol is a big one. If cortisol is high, it suppresses testosterone, and it often won't even allow testosterone to grow. So this framework is now helping veterans receive proper care, which is putting them back into service faster. In firefighter syndrome, in applying it to firefighter system and helping firefighters manually within fire departments, I've been able to help firefighters stay in service and stay a valuable member of the community and of the team, mostly because not all of the components are covered under a presumptive legislation just yet. Hopefully, in time we'll get there. But PTSD is the only knee, if you will, that firefighters can take when they need to rest and recover. But hopefully through the work of operator syndrome, building the bridge into the fire community from that beautiful framework, we can inspire workplace insurance boards to acknowledge that there are other requirements that firefighters need to get proper care, and that PTSD is not the only injury of firefighters and first responders, because we're devaluing the people that are suffering from PTSD by lumping all this crap together and applying the incorrect treatments to someone suffering. We need to ensure that PTSD stays as PTSD and isn't watered down the way that we're doing it right now. We're adding symptoms to it because we're watering it down because we can't figure it out. Well, that's because it's physiologically an injury, a complex injury. So deal with the body and allow the mind to process from a point of healing, not from a point of complex injury. Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. And it's really funny. I've been beating this drum of concussion for about 2 years in firefighters because, in the NFL, they have spotters. You take a bonk to your head and you've got 8 people assessing you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had an entire sheet of drywall fall on my head, knock me out, and my partner picked me up, hit me on the butt and said, "You good, kid? You good?" I'm like,
Yeah.
"I'm good." So
Yes, boss.
yes, boss. But so I think we actually have those impact injuries to our brain. But you
Yes.
mentioned something I wasn't aware of, and that
Yeah.
was the other
CTE.
concussive type injuries. Talk about that.
Sure. Thank you for bringing that up, and thank you for bringing that to this particular podcast as being spotlighted, because it is hidden. So if you Google or DuckDuckGo or Yahoo, whatever your search engine is, CTE, you'll get chronic traumatic encephalopathy. So what I would challenge you to do is dive about 10 pages deep and keep looking. Your algorithm hasn't shown you yet that there's something called chronic toxic encephalopathy. So that is, symptoms are very, very similar, and they are brain injuries based on toxic exposures. So there's an acute version, which I highly doubt. I mean, I am speculating right now, so we need the help of a scientist, researcher that's out there listening right now to jump on board, reach out. But I highly doubt that the acute thing is what's affecting firefighters. What I would suggest is that the chronic piece is what's affecting us. Even just look at our gears, the PFAS in our gears. If you start to look at PFAS and connect that with traumatic brain injuries, a lot of science comes up instantaneously. But there's so much more than that. And one of the things that they're seeing in firefighters is this type 3 diabetes or Alzheimer's, which is, I'm sure, of, logically to me, I'm no mathematician, or what we joke around is I'm no electrician in the fire service. But the impacts of that are because of the toxic exposures. And that's, it's presenting us as Alzheimer's potentially, but it's chronic exposure. So it's an encephalopathy. So, you joke around with people and you say, man, I keep putting this blood pressure cuff on upside down. I've put it on a million times, but you're starting to, you can walk across a room and you can forget to do or not realize that you've just done 15 things walking across the room. That was my biggest, whoa, okay, hold on. What's going on with me? As I was having major blackouts, or I would daydream into La La Land, and I was presenting like I had a concussion. And I'm like, but I didn't hit my head. So I started learning and started researching, just asking the Googles why. Why does this happen? Why does that happen? That insatiable need to know why, as we talked about at the beginning, of who I am. And so I was getting out the dictionary and I was reading scientific studies going, what does that word mean? Okay. And it would take me about 2 weeks to get through a scientific study, but I would realize, okay, whoa, this is what's happening. So, have I gotten an fMRI of my brain? Do I know the complete, function of it? No, but I can tell you what I feel like, and I can tell you that I'm sleeping like garbage, and I can tell you that I'm angry, and I can tell you that I can't remember crap, and that, I feel foggy and I feel nauseous when I stand up too quick. I check all the boxes every time I go to a fire for the next 4 or 5 days. I'm not okay, and I don't know why, right? Chronic toxic encephalopathy is what we would like to do more science. We would like to do more studies on. But it is a thing. I can pull you several studies that prove that it's a real thing. It's just that it hasn't been done on firefighters just yet.
I know all the best scientists. We'll get
Beautiful.
going.
Let's do this.
It makes me sick to my stomach a little bit, because I was having a conversation with a colleague not so long ago, and we were talking about just the dumb stuff.
Sure.
He was in the fire service a bit before I was, but he was like, yeah, I used to be in a burn tower, or burn house, as you call it. No air pack, 3/4 boots, whatever,
Sure.
just,
Yeah.
and now we look back and we think, oh no, the cancer risk, but oh my God, the brain risk.
That's it. Boom. Hello. Thank you for joining the excitement with me. It's not about the carcinogens. It is. Okay. Stop studying the carcinogens. Done. Got the t-shirt. Can we please move on to the brain implication, the Alzheimer's implication, the MS, the Parkinson's implications? I started learning really quickly after being inspired by I've done so much research on how it affects my men partners that I was like, I forgot to study, my kind. Like, I forgot to study the female. So I started researching how TBIs and progesterone kind of interact and how that can lead to a what they call a bioenergetic crisis in a woman's brain when she is in menopause, and how that can lead to MS and how that can lead to Parkinson's. Like, I'm all for women being in the fire service, but I'm also like, there is a boatload of science on how biologically we are going to respond to this. Be careful what we wish for. We need to be intelligent about how we move forward and protect ourselves and become proactive in creating those needs to protect us before we just dive in and kill all of us, like we've done to the men. Like, they have suffered because we have just beat the heck out of them. And so now we have, neither one of them is better nor worse than the other, but you're demanding to go into this profession. Just know that you're signing the proverbial line for cancer, MS, Parkinson's. Don't be afraid of it. I'm not. It's just the science isn't there. So, and the reason why I bring that up, and please don't hate me because I'm just bringing up facts, is that we don't know if women are capable of staying on the trucks till 60 like a man. Can we biologically get there as a community? If that's the case, amazing. What do we need to do to get there? I'm 47 years old. I am fighting like a snot bag through perimenopause.
It's
to
the worst.
stay on the trucks.
It's the worst.
Oh, buddy. Like, I'm not a captain yet because I've worked for 3 different departments. I'm still in the back of the truck. I can pull my own. I can do what's required, but I'm working it. Like, I am doing all that I can to stay there. I know it's hard. I'm not taking tests. I'm not taking, any sort of supplementation. I'm doing it naturally because I'm trying to stay as healthy as possible. But be careful. I'm sorry. I just need to say this. The people, I said earlier in the podcast that I see balance. I see both sides. And so I'm going to use this opportunity to talk about both sides. And I hope it falls on good ears. There are taxpayers involved in this story. There are people that need us in this story. And when we are forcing jobs to be filled by particular people, and we don't have the things in place to protect any one of those particular people, it doesn't matter what your gender is. The person who is going to be impacted are the civilians and the people that are paying our salaries, the people that are paying us to protect them. And that matters to me just as much as it does for me to stay on the truck, because there's truth in that. And so we just need to be careful. If you are in this profession, you're doing it because you love the job. And that the job loves you. Doesn't love anybody. Doesn't matter what you look like. Doesn't matter what your gender is. It hates everybody equally. It's an unbiased journey, right? Just do it because you love the job and know that there's consequences. Don't flood it. Does that make sense?
No, it absolutely makes sense. And I think awareness is paramount.
Yeah.
If we want to just for 1 second go off on the gender thing,
Okay.
I think females in general aren't getting a lot of good information.
Yes.
And female firefighters are getting zero
Agreed.
information.
Because there is no studies for female firefighters.
Right.
Because we don't have the generation to. We're just getting that first generation making it to the end, if they even make it to the end, and a lot of them are not. right? How many of them are coming off the trucks because of injury, because of promotion, which, hey, go get promoted, girl. High five, right? No problem there. But we're just seeing that first generation coming into the backstretch. There's a few that came before us, and they are the trailblazers, not us.
Right.
And there's no science because we're such a small minority who wants to put the money out in researching us, right? Not many.
Right.
Not many.
Well, JD, do you have a couple more minutes? Because I have one more thing.
I have a lot of more minutes. Don't worry.
Okay,
Let's
good.
just keep trucking.
Good.
I'm all yours till you're done with me.
Oh, how exciting. I want to talk to you about, because you're building this framework for departments, but there's got to be treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Once we recognize something's going on, there's got to be treatment. Full disclosure, yes, neither one of us is a medical doctor. Nope.
Not at all.
But what is that treatment? What could it look like? What does it look like? Is there any?
Yeah. The ultimate fire answer is, come on, share it with me. What is it? It depends. Yes! The ultimate fire answer is depends, right? So that answer applies here too. It depends. The first and foremost thing that every single person, every firefighter out there needs to do is get blood work. Okay? Hormone panel, cancer panel, cardiac, kidney function, liver function, thyroid function. Get your blood work done, folks. That will be the piece that you get to compare to your perceived feelings. Perceived feelings are very powerful. But the blood work starts the deep dive into knowing where the dysregulation lies. When you do your hormone panel, go all in. Estrogen, progesterone, all your tests, cortisols, all the ones that I can't pronounce. Don't let them not do it. Does that make sense? Don't let them double negative. Go get them. Fight for them. Okay. The next thing is get a sleep study. If you have a traumatic brain injury that is undiagnosed, whether it's toxic based or impact based, it is highly connected to sleep apnea. Okay, let's logically think that through as a firefighter. Well, I know oxygen's important, right? So if I have sleep apnea, that means there's times in my day that I'm not breathing when I'm sleeping, which means I'm not getting the oxygen I need. Okay, what does a TBI need to heal? Oxygen. So your best next logical step would be to go get a sleep study. How you doing? You're going to sleep like crap because you got a bunch of things stuck to your head and it's in a cold, weird room. But do it anyway. You'll at least get an insight into who you are. Those are the two, please do those. From there, the journey begins. And then the next piece of the equation is you need to be an advocate who's truly honest about your journey. Are you using substances to go to sleep and to cope? Is that cannabis? Is that alcohol? I know how great alcohol can make you feel and how you can, and some people use it for dealing with trauma. Some people use it as a sleep aid. You spoke about it in your awesome talk, which is you're like, why don't you take this one on this alcohol thing and sleep, because it's kind of your baby.
Well, the thing is with alcohol, it's a depressant and it will help you fall asleep faster. However, the quality of your sleep is going to be disrupted greatly, and the quantity, more than likely, you're going to wake up early and not get back to sleep. So the quantity and the quality are going to both be disrupted. Your heart rate variability is going to be garbage. So sorry, hate to be the bearer of bad news. Alcohol is not good for your sleep.
Well, and you just hit the nail on the head too, because you said it's a depressant. So you feel anxiety, depression, and anger. How much are you drinking? Right? It's going to compound. The more you drink, the more you're going to feel that way. Right? So there are things that you have to learn how to go after and get after and be accountable to for yourself. And those are behavioral treatments. And I said to you before, like, really quickly in the talk, which was, I always say about sleep specifically that deep sleep is the medicine. It's the free medicine that you need to get. But learning how to get that deep sleep is the treatment you need to start moving yourself in the right direction. And so, that's part of the equation. If you suffer from hypervigilance, I was speaking with a man where, there's this need to be addicted to the cortisol state. And this is like next level, like you're up there, you can't come down. This is a treatment that special operators tend to, they can get, which is a ganglion nerve block. So you can get an injection, and it inhibits the ability to produce like copious amounts of cortisol, and then like that need to be in that state. There's things like hyperbaric chambers that you can do. This is where I always say, Dr. Chris, where are you? Because this is your wheelhouse. Fortunately for me, through blood work and through a lot of hard work, I've been able to stabilize without requiring aggressive treatments. But I've also been at it for like 7 years. So I wasn't at a state where I was acute and required a more aggressive treatment. Dr. Chris Free has a textbook, not a textbook, he'd kill me for saying that, a read-along book, flip, turn page, or choose your own adventure fun book about operator syndrome. And it's called Operator Syndrome, that firefighters can purchase. And I always say, you can purchase it for yourself, or you can purchase it for your fire department and put it on the coffee table at every firehouse, and put it on your chief's desks too, because chiefs and platoon chiefs or battalion chiefs, how we demand things from our staff, you're a direct implication on the intensity and the severity of firefighter syndrome. And if you don't think that you are, can we please talk, and can you tell me and teach me why you don't think you are? Because I need to change my opinion if that's the case. And I'm open to that. But how you govern your staff, how you demand them to go here and there in between, how you're not allow them to have shutdown periods at 1 o'clock in the afternoon because they're going to run all night long. You're contributing to firefighter syndrome. You're contributing to the intensity of it. You know that your engine 1 or engine 2 or pump 1 or truck, whatever you call your apparatus, has just finished a industrial fire. And the next 5 shifts, you're now asking more of them. You're compounding the injury. You as a leader need to lead by knowing the hearts of your people and by knowing what your people have come through, and adjusting your strategy and your tactical objectives to accommodate for the load and the stress that your people are facing. Yes, I understand the demands from above require you as a leader to accomplish and execute what they are asking, but your job is to balance what your people need and what your bosses need. So you are the direct link between that.
I just gave you a standing ovation. That was so good. Well, and I think the bottom line here is recognition.
Yes.
Get tested by a doctor with whom you can convey the enormity of what we do. Because I don't think physicians, for the most part, they don't know. They don't know what we do.
And the firefighter syndrome scale is to print it, fill it out, and if you're willing, take it into the doctor and have that discussion. The dehydration piece, the nutrition disruption. There's, and we've talked about this really quickly on multiple different podcasts, and everybody in the world knows, but this is how this relates to this particular subject, which is the microbiome in your stomach. Like, your gut health if it's not healthy, it can't communicate the mitochondria in your body. Like, it has a function. It needs to do stuff and things. So you jamming a peanut butter, Kraft peanut butter wrap in your gullet at 3 a.m. ain't good for you, folks. I know. But, like, who's scrounging for that last piece of pizza in the fridge? Did A shift leave their pizza? And you eat it at 2 o'clock in the morning because you're starving. I get it. But you need to prepare for that. Bring your own food. Or, have a bar. Or, pick a particular diet that suits you for that. Or. Just know, if that's what you're doing, that's okay, because I get it. But you're going to suffer the consequences. You're getting off shift. You ran all night. This is when I've always done it. Oh, and I'm still trying to break the habit. Listen, guilty as charged. You ran all night. You're sitting around the coffee table waiting for shift change. What are you doing? Drinking coffee. Copious amounts of coffee.
All of it, yes.
What are you going to try and do when you go home?
Sleep. I'll take a nap, maybe.
And the nappuccino is way out the door at that one, right?
I love the nappuccino.
Right? So you're not sleeping, folks, because you decided to drink a pot of coffee by the time you got home. So what are you going to do? You're going to push through at 3 o'clock. You're going to feel like a bag of hammers. And
love you.
Right?
A bag of hammers. That is not what I say usually. It's a bag of something else.
Yeah. I try to do my daughter might listen to this, so I'm trying to be nice. But no, but you're gonna push through, and then by around 8 o'clock at night, you're probably gonna get a second wave, which now is leading to a form of insomnia. So you've just wrecked yourself completely.
Check yourself before you wreck yourself.
That's right.
All right, this is what I'm planning to do. I'm planning to put in the show notes your PYROC website so that they can take the survey.
Certainly.
I'm planning to put Dr. Chris's book and also your email so that the chiefs can email you and convince you why they're not being part of the problem.
Right.
What do you think?
And yes, please. Because, and first of all, listen, I'm going to choose my words carefully. For about 2.5 years, wrote policy. I was directly answerable to our fire chief. I've done that for 2 departments. 3 departments. All 3 departments, I've participated in creating policy and creating training and lots of frameworks and lots of documentation. I was privileged to sit at the coffee table of the fire chief, and I was privileged to witness the stress that they deal with in trying to manage us. It's like a kindergarten class. I'm sorry, chief. No, for real, right? And more than that, I would say of all the chiefs that I've met, which is a few now, they all care. They do. They have a objective, and they're trying to figure out how to execute that objective. And part of that objective comes from their bosses, and they have to become answerable to their bosses. If firefighters could sit in a chief's office for one day, they would change their tune on how they judge the fire chief. And they should change their tune. Get to know your fire chief and find out what their stresses are. Firefighter syndrome is not just for firefighters, it's for fire chiefs as well. Because my heart goes out to the stresses that they have. Now, it just goes the other way too, right? So I've heard, fire chiefs complain about firefighters, and I've heard firefighters complain about fire chiefs. There is a disjointed relationship that we need to heal and fix. And the only way we do that is by having great conversations as to why. Let's have that conversation, Chiefy. Tell me why I'm wrong. Why I'm here talking to the firefighters saying, check yourself before you wreck yourself. So what can I do to help support you and what you need? But what I do need from you is accountability in how your battalion chiefs or your bureau chiefs or your district chiefs or your captains even are compounding this issue because we're stuck in this traditional way of this is the way we've done it for years. We didn't have the call volume we had 20 years ago as we do today. We don't have the building construction we have today as we did many years ago. Our fuel loads are different. Our burn times are different. Our run times are different. Our critical infrastructure is different. We have to adjust. We have to change. And part of that is firefighters. We need to be accountable to the behaviors that we're doing that are causing us injuries. And Chief, can you please take accountability for being stuck in traditional ways, like not adjusting the schedule? Like, you can change the schedule that your department operates at. You are operating in a schedule that is creating a half-life of your firefighter, and you're wondering why you are dealing with workplace insurance claims that are increasing and chopping at your budget. Well, is it a lot of work to change your schedule? You frickin' betcha. But you can do it. Let's do it together, right? I know they care. I don't want this to be a slander. No one out there should slander a chief. That's all this long-winded statement was all about. I have had the privilege of sitting in a fire chief's office, multiple fire chief's office, and we need, as a fire department, we need to back off them a little bit.
I was going to say, Jadie, do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave the listeners with? But I think that was perfect.
I think I'm going to agree with you, because fire chiefs don't get enough credit, and everybody's attacking them right now. I hear a lot of podcasts where, yes, we need to change the schedule, folks. Like, we're not the way we used to be, but we can't do it fighting. We can't do it demanding. We need to respect the amount of work that they put in to protect their people too.
Oh my gosh. I appreciate you so much. And I definitely think we should drop the mic.
Boom! Mic drop.
Boom. It's AZ and Jadie, and we are definitely out.
Out.